back to another edition of The Preview. I'm Adam Kulikowski. I'll be your host, the one feeding all the questions to our expert on the other side of that glass, Andy Shea. This week, we're heading into the third week of postseason. Here's what's on tap in this episode. We'll take a look at District 3 Class 5A semifinal between Exeter Township and Cedar Cliff, the District 3 Class 3A championship featuring Boiling Springs and Wyomissing, and this Class 6A championship with Wilson and Harrisburg. Andy, welcome. How are you today?
Doing good. Yeah, three classifications to dig into in terms of District 3. I'm excited, and very good job getting the District 3 Class 3A championship out all in the right sentence. So let's get rolling.
Hey, we make that mistake once a few weeks ago with Big Spring versus Big Springs, Boiling Spring versus Boiling Springs. You don't make that same mistake again. So yeah, before we keep going though, Andy, I just want to say, congratulations to some of the district champs that have already been crowned. Steel High, Juniata, Williams Valley, State College, all earning district championships already. Congratulations to those teams.
Yeah, how about the Vikings beating Tri-Valley? That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yes, I'm surprised I didn't get a text message from the Williams Valley folks after we did not pick them.
It was a 50-50 game. They were the underdog and they pulled it off. Good for them.
Yeah, at the Mud Bowl though, their coach Tim Savage had told me he thought they could come back after that Mud Bowl at 2 weeks, and in that championship game and win that game. He saw things there, and we didn't pick them, but congratulations to the Vikings. What a great job that they did. So we're gonna have more hardware hosted this weekend.
We are.
Andy, each week, we do a bracket breakdown these last 2 weeks. We do our preview of some key matchups. Let's do this a little bit differently this week, where we sort of combine those two segments since we have a limited number of games.
Yeah, let's put it all together.
Yeah.
Let's just make it one big go.
Okay, let's kick off maybe in the District 3 4A semifinal, featuring a pair of matchups. That's number 4 Berks Catholic versus number 1 Bishop McDevitt, and then number 3 Kennerdale versus number 2 Lampeter Strasburg. We'll start with the McDevitt game, Andy. Nobody's really slowed this team down. Give us your breakdown here. Anybody have an opportunity there to compete with them? Berks Catholic's first up this week.
No, to answer your overarching question, I don't think so. Marquee wise, name wise, right? Like program pedigree recognition, Berks Catholic McDevitt. You think it is a good matchup, but you're right. No one's even slowed this offense down since week one, and I don't think the Saints have any tools to really do it either. And I'm just going to warn everyone: don't sleep on the McDevitt defense. Do not, because the Crusaders win like 56-7 every week. It seems like when you score that many points, the defense is just kind of riding the coattails of that offense. They are not. So do I expect this to be a competitive game over 48 minutes? Not necessarily.
Yeah. And Andy, we talk about the Crusaders, rolling up 40, 50, 60 points on their opponents pretty much at will. And that's what Coach Wechter really letting off the gas pretty early in some of these games. But then that defense, obviously limiting, opponents to just what feels like leftover scraps points at the end of the game where it really doesn't matter anymore. So what element of McDevitt's game impressed you most? Offense, defense, special teams? What really stands out to you?
Oh, it has to be the offense, because it's just a lethal flamethrower. I mean, you have three wide receivers. 3 like legitimate number 1 high school football wide receivers. You have 3 of them. You have 2 what essentially are starting running backs. They have 2 starting running backs, and they have a freshman gunslinger of a quarterback who can spin it. That's, they just haven't been slowed down. I mean, that's the bottom line. That is a lot for a defense, especially 3 quality starting wide receivers. You're asking your 3rd defensive back on high school teams to cover a number 1 receiver. How do you do that? It's just too hard. So that is it for me.
Yes. Andy, in the other matchup, Kennerdale battles Lampeter Strasburg. 62 points Lampeter Strasburg dropped on Big Spring last week. Did that surprise you?
A little bit, but also it didn't surprise me because my concern for Big Spring in that game was, did they already accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, right? And a little bit, it played out like they had. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in this matchup, just give me that explosiveness and the volatility of the LS offense. They're going to ask Kennerdale to score at least 30 points to keep pace. They're just going to do that. And I don't really see that in the cards for the Rams. And a little bit again, I'm going to go on the other side of the ball. The LS defense, they've been kind of quietly all good. They've been quietly kind of pretty good this season because Lampeter Strasburg scored nearly 500 points in 11 games. That's a lot. But they've only surrendered 115. That's a really good number. That's not an accident, by the way. So I'm taking LS in this one.
Yep. That makes that the favorite. As you look forward next week, Lampeter Strasburg potentially, if you're right, against Bishop McDevitt. You look at that, is that a matchup that maybe finally tests McDevitt just a little bit, pushes them just a little bit there?
Well, you're going to find out a little bit more about McDevitt's defense next week if it's LS. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay, we'll talk more about that one next week as we know that matchup and start to break it down a little bit more. Let's go down to 5A, where number 7 Exeter Township and number 6 Cedar Cliff face off. This is one of those games I'd really love to just get your full breakdown on, like we've been doing the last few weeks.
Yeah. So first of all, how about the number 6 and 7 seeds playing in the semifinal? Cedar Cliff, a 6 seed, and you're like, hey, if we make it to the semifinals, will we get a home game? 99% of the time, you're like, no, but they do. So I am not surprised at all. Not one little bit, not even in the slightest, that Exeter Township is in this game. Cedar Cliff, I would say, is a mild surprise for me. But when the brackets were released, I liked the pod that they were in, with them getting lowered off in first. You kind of figured they would play Shippensburg in the second game, which they did. And they won that game 10-7. But it was still a 50-50 game in terms of who was going to win that one. Either way, it was going to play out that it was clearly a bit of a 50-50 game. It could have easily been 14-10 Shippensburg, right? So the other part of this is you have to look at who Exeter's played and why it's not a surprise at all that they're here. They have 3 losses. One loss, Central York, who just lost last week in the District 6A semifinal. They've already played undefeated Governor Mifflin, so they know. And they lost to 6A Hempfield, which was a playoff team that won a first-round game. They lost to them by 3. So they have played some teams. And they have an experienced, savvy quarterback in Colin Payne, and that is something that I don't think Cedar Cliff has seen much of this season. Think about it. If you go back through Cedar Cliff, when have they seen a quarterback that sort of has a little bit of moxie and can also chuck it around a little bit? So he's got 1,700 yards, 18 touchdowns, and I just want to say, you have to remember that the Eagles are not a chuck it around team. It's not like he's throwing the ball all over the lot. They only throw it like 15 to 18 times a game. So they're not like a real heavy passing offense. They have depth at receiver. It's consistent. It's constant. They're a very balanced offense. They've rushed for 2,300 yards this year. They've thrown for around 1,700. Those are really good numbers. They have a go-to running back in Eric Nagel. He's their sort of like flash guy. He's got 1,200 yards, leading them in rushing, but they also have like a 220-pound bruiser in Tyler Yoakum. He's like the touchdown guy. He's got 13 touchdowns this year. So when they get inside the 10, guess who's getting the ball? The 220-pound dude. And the other thing I'll say about Nagel is he averages 7.1 yards per carry. So they can get you a little coming and going, and that is a big part of this game for me.
Andy, last week, we saw Coach Gillen and the Colts really lean heavily on Jonte Morris last week. 40 carries. He had 40 carries last week. If you're the Colts this week, is this another second dose of number 29, or is there maybe more of a balanced attack with Ethan Doyle's arm?
I think you kind of, if you're Cedar Cliff, you kind of want to muddy this football game up as much as possible. You hug the ball as much as you can. You have a back who can carry the load, right? Can you keep him on the field? Can you get him 33, 34 carries? I think there's a lot of similarities between the Shippensburg defense and the Exeter defense. So I think Cedar Cliff wants to just grind. And I think a good game from Ethan Durrell at quarterback, a good game. I think that goes it doesn't have to be great or spectacular, just a good, solid game. I think that goes a long, long way for the Colts in this one.
Yeah, and that cat, he's very capable of doing that. He's had an excellent season, and definitely has the skills to help balance that offense if they see that in the game plan to execute. Andy, just a quick note, we talked to Jonte in our latest edition of the Spotlight, so you could check that interview out on fourthdownmagazine.com. I would like to get your prediction on this game, though, before we move on.
So I like Exeter Township. I liked them at the beginning of the year, and even when they were a 3-loss team, I kept them in our Elite 11 rankings because I'm like, they're good. Do I expect Cedar Cliff to impact the outcome of this game? I do, 100%. But I've liked the Eagles all year, so I'm going to pick them in this game.
Okay, Andy, there's one more game in 5A. That's Spring Grove. They get a crack at Governor Mifflin. I don't know that anybody could take on Governor Mifflin, but can Spring Grove, can they keep pace? Can they give them a battle? Can they test them at all?
Come on. No, man, no. Did you see Hempfield does not have a bad defense. Hempfield does not play bad defense. They are not a defense lacking in tools. And Governor Mifflin just shredded them. And Spring Grove, they're not equipped for this. Who is? I didn't think Hempfield would get – I knew Hempfield was going to lose the game. I didn't think they'd get, steamrolled and boat raced like that. And they don't play bad defense. So, yeah, to answer your question, no.
Thank you. Let's move on to a pair of Saturday games. Let's do the first one in District 3 6A. It's the championship game. Number 5 Wilson travels to Severance Field to take on number 2 Harrisburg. Andy, this is another one I really want to get your breakdown on.
So I want to go back real quick. So Wilson has the tools in its kit, in my opinion, defensively to play with Central York, and they kept Bo Prabula from wrecking the game. And I kind of figured that might be the case. It's not easy, but Wilson's built to do what they did last week. But it's just one player, right? They had to sort of make one player less impactful. And even though he's an FBS recruit, they did it. And I still wasn't willing to pick against Bo last week, but truth be told, I really did think Wilson could win that game. And it was a good matchup for them. That's the way I want to put it. And I'm not sure this is a good matchup for the Bulldogs. I'm really not. Only because Harrisburg won't be uncomfortable in that kind of scenario. In a tight, close game, in a game that's sort of like, a taffy pull, they're like, yeah, I've been there, done that. We're good. They have multiple and equal weapons to work with. And Wilson, while their defense has evolved into a little bit of a game changer, that's a lot to put on their plate on that side of the ball. And I think that the ability of Harrisburg to sort of inside out you a little bit, not with flash, but just sort of grind on you inside out. That's hard for a defense. So my question is, can the Bulldogs knock Harrisburg in that combo running game of Mekhi Hopkins inside and Kyle Williams Jr. outside? Can they knock them off their spot? I'll say this. The Cougars, they just kind of find that spot where they like to be, where they're comfortable. Both sides of the ball, and they don't budge once they get there. They're not going to flash you to death. But the other flip side, and the last point I want to make in this game, Harrisburg's defense has surrendered more than 3 touchdowns in the game only once this season. Once. Wilson is not a flash offense, right? They kind of get what they need, but they're not a flash offense. Harrisburg's defense has been solid. The only team to score more than 3 touchdowns on them was Governor Mifflin. So that's my breakdown on that game.
And that says a lot. That says a lot right there.
Thank you.
Andy, what have you seen with Wilson's play over the second half of the season? They started 2-3, been building momentum since then, found their footing a little bit to make this run. What have you seen?
Yeah, so the second half, they got a nice stretch of 3 lesser quality opponents to get some things worked out right after the game 6, 7, and 8, right? And they held Manheim Township to 14 points in a 1-score game. They've held Hempfield to 21 points in a 1-score game. They are extremely well coached. And a win like Central York last week and those 2 final regular season wins means that they are maximizing every ounce of talent that they have. It's not surprising at all that Doug Doms and his staff get it. It's what they do. Again, I will read it, that they're not really anything special offensively in terms of elite talent, but they are convinced that they can do what they need to do in crunch time and score. So in tight spots, they're fearless, and I just don't think they're going to go away quietly.
So is that success? Can they continue that on Saturday? Give us your prediction.
So I said last week, and I'll reiterate, I wasn't going to pick against Bo because nobody had beaten him in the last couple of years, and I'm not counting the state championship game because that's not really a fair fight. And I'm not picking against the Cougars either because nobody other than Guffler and Mifflin, and they took Mifflin into the third quarter, nobody's been able to bump Harrisburg off its spot. So they very subtly set the tone, tenor, and pace for a game, and they just don't move off of it. They just stay right there. So I'm going to pick Harrisburg, and I think if one team gets the 3 touchdowns, they might win.
Well, Andy, let's do one more before we wrap up. This is the
Sure.
District 3 Class 3A Championship where Boiling Springs punched its ticket to face number 1 seed Wyomissing. Let's get one more breakdown on this game, Andy.
Yeah, this is an intriguing matchup on a couple different levels. So my biggest question is the way Boiling Springs wins is they have a powerful run-based offense with a better than you think passing game, and they outscore the opposition, right? This offense is pretty darn good. I would say it's borderline. This is a great sort of little bit modified wing T offense. Their defense is good. They're not great. They're good. So they can give up a little bit, but the offense generally has covered that with little or no problem, right? Because of their explosiveness. Wyomissing's allowed 93 points in 12 games. With 9 of those 12 games, they've allowed 1 or fewer scores. And judging by the blowout scores, it's pretty clear that several of those games where they gave up 1 score, it happened after the outcome was already decided, right? So Wyomissing's big. They're physical. I go to comparing apples to apples. Wyomissing beat Middletown 14-0 last week. Boiling Springs beat Middletown 26-23 a month ago. My point about this game is Boiling Springs offense has to do something really good. And I want to bring up a little hidden key in this game that I think could be critical if Boiling Springs is going to have success. Special teams. Their punt return game and their kickoff return game is an absolute game changer. They are so good at special teams in the return game. I've seen them twice, and both times I was like, whoa, they are really, really good in the return game. And they're going to need something maybe like that to win this game. So that's my breakdown. Wyomissing will play the game anyway it needs to be played, and they're really tough to beat.
Andy, you touched on both teams there facing Middletown. Just 1 week ago, obviously you said, Middletown lost by missing 14-0. That provide maybe like a little bit of a blueprint for Boiling Springs on how to maybe keep this game close and stay in a tight battle with them?
To be honest with you, not really. Because the Bubblers aren't going to win this game by keeping the score down. I just don't think they are. I just don't see it. I just don't see them having success that way. That doesn't play to their strength. Boiling Springs' offense has to majorly impact this game and be cooking for the Bubblers to have a crack.
Okay, Andy, you mentioned that. Did they have a crack? Give us your prediction on this game.
So Boiling Springs, they went to Wyomissing a year ago, a little bit of greenhorns, kind of having some new success, and they were schooled. They just got absolutely schooled by the Spartans. And most of the players on that team a year ago for Boiling Springs, they're back on that field again. They are better prepared for this matchup. My question is, can this offense score enough? I mean, Wyomissing's defense is borderline elite at the Class 3A level. And I think the Bubblers need to score 3 or 4 touchdowns to have a shot. Can they do it? I don't know. I'm not sure how, what can they do against Wyomissing's defense? I'm not betting against Wyomissing defense, so I'm picking the Spartans.
Okay, Andy, that's it for this edition of the preview. Get out to see one of these games or another on the slate. support your local teams, and check us out at fourthdownmagazine.com for all of our weekly content. Andy, take care.
Thanks, Adam.